So the college football rankings came out last night, and, as we all thought, they kind of screwed it up.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, HSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me. Bama Online's Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by GameTime. I'll tell you about GameTime here in just a little bit. Thank you, everydayers, for joining us, and thank you, newbies, for joining us, too. Y'all are all the best. I don't discriminate. College football playoff rankings came out last night, Jimmy. I mean, honestly, I was thinking Bama would be at worst 9, maybe even 8. The message they're sending, and this, I know, we're probably old man yelling at cloud because this is all going to change, right? I mean, Tennessee plays Georgia this weekend, perhaps without Nico Amiel.
Be determined.
Yeah. And if he doesn't play, I don't think they have a shot. So, I mean, this is all going to change. And then Indiana plays Ohio State in a few weeks. We all think that Ohio State will blow their doors off. And then maybe they will be ranked appropriately. Right now, though, they're undefeated. So maybe you have to put them
I'm not sure what their ranking appropriately would be, though. I mean, I want to see that Ohio State game first, but I'm of the opinion they're not going to fall out. I mean,
no, I'm really okay if they don't fall out. They are undefeated in a Power 5 conference or Power 4. But, they've played a sack of grits. I mean, they've just played nothing. And I'm so tired of just they're undefeated. All they can play is who's in front of them. Yeah, well, who's in front of them can be controlled to a degree.
And regardless of whether it can be controlled, I agree that there's an eye test that you got to use in situations like this where you have a Power 4 team and a powerful conference, and the way the schedule fell, they're just not playing many great teams. So I get using the eye test, but this is the way I look at it. I mean, this is the big picture to me here, Luke. Let's only put in one group of 5 team. But Notre Dame's getting in clearly, and Notre Dame's one of my big issues in terms of being ahead of Alabama. One Big 12 team's getting in, obviously. One ACC team's getting in. Okay, so that's 4. Now you're left with 8. If from the Big 10, Ohio State and Oregon are getting in, you probably have Indiana and Penn State getting in. That only leaves room for 4 SEC teams. And there could be 7 SEC teams that could finish 10-2. That's not going to happen, but could be. I'm just saying room for 4 SEC teams isn't very much. So you're probably taking 11-1 Penn State. I mean, 11-1 Indiana and 11-1 Penn State, who've beaten nobody, over SEC teams who are 10-2 or even 9-3 that will have a much more impressive resume, in my opinion. So that's going to be the battleground to me. Penn State, Indiana versus SEC teams with 2 and 3 losses.
Yeah, that is again, that's my problem with this. I mean, shoot, you want to get down to brass tacks, Miami hadn't played anybody either.
That's largely true.
And I'm looking at the bracket now, Alabama traveling to Indiana. That is intriguing. I mean, the Crimson on Crimson, and they seed about half of what we do in Bryant-Denny. And Alabama fans, I think, I'd go. I'd 100%
go. So not only, I mean, I've just said this, so not only are you cool in favor of the matchup, but you'd be excited to get to Bloomington and see.
No. I'm not necessarily – yeah, I'm in favor of it in the sense that I think it's a good matchup for Alabama. I mean, I don't think Indiana – I still don't think Indiana –
considering you'd be on the road in round 1, I agree.
Yeah. So the problem that there's so many problems, but and that's going to change because we both believe Indiana will lose to Ohio State, right? I mean, I
believe they're going to lose to Ohio State, but I don't think Ohio State's going to rout them. I think.
Okay. Well, if Ohio State does lose to them, I'm beginning to wonder if Ohio State deserves to be in this thing.
That would be that becomes a very good question at that point.
Because Ohio State's, you can say, well, their best wins at Penn State. That's right. Penn State hadn't played anybody and definitely hadn't beaten anybody.
Sometimes a loss can help you, though. We're not going to use the word quality loss when it comes to football, but I think Ohio State proved at Oregon that they're a good team. I mean, they lost in a close game at Oregon. That's different than Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, for instance.
Here's the thing, and this is going to make Penn State fans mad, because Ohio State got in when they were 11-1,
Yeah.
didn't win the conference, over Penn State, who was like 11-2 and did win the conference. And they actually beat Ohio State, but they had 2 losses. And I think this time, if I were really judging this, and Penn State goes 11-1, and Ohio State goes 11-2, but wins the conference, I mean, Ohio State's going to get in. I'd leave Penn State out. I mean, Penn State has nothing on their resume that says we're good.
No, you'd have to study their wins to come up with a really good one. I mean, maybe Washington, maybe Nebraska. I mean, that's their best wins. And those are fine teams, but they're not good. They're not, if you beat Washington and Nebraska, you should be in. Oh, they also beat Illinois. And they're not terrible either. I mean, they're pretty good, but that's not, I mean, Alabama beat Georgia. Alabama beat LSU. Alabama beat preseason top 10 Missouri, 31-0. I mean,
Missouri and South Carolina, who are both in the field.
Yeah, Alabama has 4 top 25 wins. Penn State hasn't beaten any. Penn State hasn't won their way into the playoff. Indiana certainly has. What's Indiana's best win?
Alabama blew out Wisconsin, who Penn State had to really scratch and claw and fight to beat.
That's right. So I'm curious as to what Indiana does against Ohio State. But here's my thinking. I think Indiana's going to finish 11-1. I'll be pretty shocked if they're not in. Now, I'm not going to argue that they should be. And for all these arguments about, hey, they should be in the playoff, they should be out of the playoff, the season's not done. I mean, I think we should get to the end before we say emphatically one way or the other. So I'm not going to say whether 11-1 Indiana should be in or not. I want to see who's the argument. But an 11-1 Indiana, let's say this, Luke, like today. Let's just say today. Let's say LSU wins out, Indiana wins out. LSU will be 9-3. Indiana 11-1. I'd say LSU has a better resume. I mean,
by a long shot.
In terms of who they've beaten. And yes, they lost 3 times, but wouldn't have Indiana lost those games that LSU lost? So that's kind of would be my point.
The other thing that, again, there's nothing that can be done about this right now, but BYU getting a 3 seed makes me want to vomit in terror.
Yeah, they got to look at that in the offseason. They got to look at that for sure.
And the other thing is that's funny. I mean, they keep talking about we want the best 12 teams in. And look, Georgia is not Georgia of old, but there's nobody in their right mind that I think would have Georgia out of a 12-team field over, say, BYU, over, say, Boise State, over, say, Indiana.
You're leaving Georgia out. If Georgia was in the playoff, they could win it.
Yeah.
They could win it. You've got teams in the playoff that have no chance of winning the playoff.
Boise State has no shot
whatsoever.
BYU has no shot.
Indiana's not going to win the playoff.
Indiana has no shot
in the playoff. Even if you give them a bye in the first, they're not going to win the playoff. Georgia might. They might. I don't think they will either, but they might.
I don't think they will either, and I'm with you, but I believe in, if you said, okay, you can have if let's say all of them are in the field, you can have Boise State, BYU, and Indiana, and even Penn State, or you can take Georgia. Which one would you take to win it all? All of them are in there. I would take Georgia, 100%.
Georgia, and not even Georgia without any hesitation. And this is after we just saw Georgia play pretty bad, in Oxford. That was, I think, the worst performance I've seen from a Georgia team since 2020 and maybe before. I mean, that was a hot gun offense that Georgia had in Oxford. And I do realize Ole Miss is pretty good on defense, no doubt. But who's just as good or better on defense than Ole Miss? Tennessee. I mean, I think Georgia, it's at home, but Georgia better lace them up Saturday.
Yeah. Okay. But if Nico ain't playing, I think they can go. Who is Shoelace Robinson? What was
I think Gaston Moore is their backup quarterback. Is that right? But he's not going to beat Georgia. I wouldn't think. No matter.
Well, he came in for one play against Alabama and threw a pick.
He did. So I like that guy.
I wish he could have played a little more.
He has a great QB. He has a great Alabama QBR rating.
Game time. Yeah, I talk about it all the time. If you want to use code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off that first purchase. Look, maybe you want to go to see Bama play Purdue in Mackey Arena this Friday night. That would be cool. You can go to Game Time, get $20 off that first purchase. You can go by yourself, take a friend, take a date, take a mistress. I don't care what you take. Take whatever you want to. And you can get a great price. Or you can go see Bama Mercer. Those tickets are going to be on the cheap, but they're going to be on the real cheap on Game Time because Game Time gives you the best prices guaranteed. And Game Time is just the best. Their customer service is the best. Their app is the best. Everything's the best. And I've used them a bunch of times myself. I've used them no less than 10 times. That's a lot for a ticket service app. So, I mean, I'm pro Game Time. I'm going to probably buy some Iron Bowl tickets on Game Time because I love Game Time that much. And you should love Game Time too because it is the best. And use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off that first purchase. Terms do apply. But Game Time, what time is it? It's Game Time. I also want to tell you about Academy. Jimmy and I were at Academy not too terribly long ago, and we had a great time. Your new Academy Sports and Outdoor store is now open in Birmingham with the best sports equipment, outdoor gear, apparel, and footwear from the brands you love, all at low prices every day. We carry a wide selection of trusted brands like Nike, Stanley, Brooks, Carhartt, Blackstone, Yeti, Titleist, Shimano, and more. Academy has everything you need to gear up for fun: camping, hunting, fishing, tailgating, running, exercises, and more. Plus, you can shop online or on the app with free in-store pickup. Need it fast? They have 1 hour curbside pickup, so you can load up and load out with ease. Or enjoy free shipping to your home on purchases over 25 smacks. Your new Academy Sports and Outdoor store is located at 4610 U.S. Highway 280. Go check out Academy. You'll love it. Jimmy and I were there, and we hope we saw you. We don't know. It was about a month ago now, but we hope we did. I want to stick with these rankings here for a minute because, I do think they screwed the rankings up. I'm going to say that. I think that having Indiana at what do they have them? I guess they have them at 5. Is that right?
I think Indiana is 5. Indiana and again, so much of it is not their fault because they can't help the Big Ten schedule. That's just playing cards you're dealt. They did, however, line up. I think their non-conference schedule, I have memorized it because it's that bad. Charlotte, FIU, and Western Illinois.
And on top of that, their Big Ten conference schedule does not include Penn State. It includes Ohio State, but we think they'll lose to them. It doesn't include Oregon. I don't think they played Wisconsin, did they?
No.
Okay.
No Wisconsin, no Iowa, no USC.
I mean, that's pretty bad. I mean, and again, the Big Ten thing, they can't really help. And I also get it if you say, hey, look, Indiana's Indiana. They didn't know they were going to be this good. Okay, fair. And I empathize. But I think what you have to say is, okay, that's fair. But what you sacrifice when you take that gamble is you don't get to be seated as high when you're undefeated. It just doesn't work that way. Now, if they beat Ohio State on the road in Columbus, I don't care if they beat them 3-2, then I will listen to the argument. But until then, I think it's also fair to say, yes, I would put them in the playoff field. No, they definitely wouldn't be number 5.
Yep. And I just want to see how the game with Ohio State goes. I mean, if they beat Ohio State, I mean, that's one thing. I think just keeping it close, I'll be like, well, if they're 11-1 and lost a close game to Ohio State, I would have a very hard time saying they don't deserve to be in the playoff. But if they don't come close to Ohio State and their best win is Washington, I mean, who's 500, if that, I mean, I'm going to have a hard time saying they should be in over even a 3-loss SEC team whose 3 losses are to playoff teams on the road, because I'm not going to assume Indiana will beat those teams. And I know it's a lot of the committee. But this is what I'm asking the committee to do. You have to play hypothetical games in your head. You have to play these games in your head. For instance, everyone on the committee right now has Notre Dame ahead of Alabama. And apparently they did it without much thinking. This is 2 weeks in a row. Notre Dame is ahead of Alabama. And I get that Notre Dame has 1 loss and Alabama has 2. But everyone on the committee, I ask you, if Alabama and Notre Dame are playing on a neutral field, who's favored and who wins the game. You got to play those games in your head. And Alabama has been a better team than Notre Dame this year. Their strength of schedule is like 50 slots below Alabama's, and they have a worse loss. And Alabama's got better wins.
It's
at least one. I mean,
I'm going to also say, looking at this bracket, I stand by my stance that I don't want to go to the SEC title game, and I hate feeling that way. Let me also say that people are like, well, the SEC should still mean something. It should, and I agree. But, Jimmy, I said this a long time ago. It ain't going to mean as much. Now, it'll mean something if you were, if Alabama only had one loss or was undefeated, I'd be like, yeah, let's do this thing. Let's get all the way through. But as it stands, I much would rather have the rest after the Iron Bowl than play at Texas or A&M even, or whoever, and have a shot at having that third loss that probably won't punish us in the sense of we won't fall out of the playoffs, but we could drop in the rankings and have to go on the road and play again on, say, December 18th or whatever date it is, December something like that. So I am pro skipping the SEC championship game if two other teams can get there. And the reasoning behind that is I also think if we do it that way, we have a better shot to get to the 5 seed. The 5 seed might be the most coveted seed there is, because here you go. You get the 5 seed, you get to play the worst of the other teams that are in the field that aren't getting a bye. And that will probably be
the group of 5 team.
You play at home. And then you play the 4 seed, who will likely be a very flawed Miami or a very flawed Clemson or a very flawed BYU, somebody like that, or whoever else comes out of the Big 12, a very flawed Colorado. Alabama, Colorado, after as a 5-4 thing in New Orleans or wherever, that's must-watch TV. And I feel very good about Alabama's chances. So, and then in the semifinals, you might have to play Oregon, but let's also call a spade here. That what are the odds? This Oregon team doesn't look like a team that can run the table to me. So they've got a loss coming.
I agree. That's a great point. I never thought about it till you just said that.
They've got a loss coming.
I don't think this.
Why not us?
This Oregon team is not as good as last year's Michigan team. I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
I agree with you. And so I'm saying if they got a loss coming, why not us? Besides, they will have to play the winner of the 8-9 game, who could be somebody like a Georgia, who could be somebody like an Ole Miss. You're telling me Ole Miss and Georgia can't beat Oregon? I think they can.
I think they could, especially in neutral field. I mean, that's not a road game. And this is why I'm going to be really, really bullish on this. I mean, I think an SEC team will win the national championship. One of the SEC teams, one of them. And there could be like 2 or 3 SEC teams in the semifinals.
Yeah. That would be kind of awesome in my point of view. I think nationally that would be frowned upon.
Probably saying there'll also be me claiming at the end, by the way, when there's 3 SEC teams in the semifinals, and I'll also say, yeah, and 2 SEC teams you left out should have been in. 2.
Yeah. Well, I guess the other way to look at it is if you win the SEC, let's say Alabama goes and plays Texas, and let's say Alabama were to win, which that alone, the eyeballs for that will be bananas. If Texas is 11-1, Alabama's 10-2, you got Jalen Milroe in a rematch of his first big start from the previous year. He's from that area. He was committed to Texas. Sark, who coached under Bama. Sark, who's never beaten Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer, who's never lost to Sark. I mean, there's a lot of positives to that SEC title game too. I get it. And if you want to be an optimist and say Alabama wins and therefore would get one of the seeds, I would argue Alabama would probably end up being the 2 seed.
Probably 2, assuming Oregon wins out. And I think the best reason of all that we want that to happen is because that's what me and you predicted like last July.
That is what we predicted.
We both had Alabama, Texas as the SEC championship game. So that's
what we do enjoy being right.
Well, it happens so rarely. It's a Haley's Comet situation.
Yeah. That is very, very true. Let's talk a little FanDuel because FanDuel's the best. You know I love FanDuel. You love FanDuel. We all love FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The Locked On Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. You win your first $5 bet. That's only at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook and official partner of the NFL. All right, so some recruiting stuff. Man, Jimmy, Hayes Fawcett, who I don't know how he has time to do anything except graphics.
Hardest working man in show business.
He has predicted flipping season's going to be flipping incredible this year. We both believe, and most everybody at Bama Online believes, Caleb Cunningham will be flipping to Ole Miss. I hate it. I want him in this class. I'm not downplaying it at all. I'd love to have him. But Alabama will get somebody else, I'm sure. So many people are predicting that Dawson Merritt will flip to Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
That one doesn't bother me as much because I think Alabama's got some guys that they like a little better in the class already. But I would love to have Dawson Merritt in this class.
Oh, yeah,
but I'll also look at this if you're Dawson Merritt and your choices are Alabama and Nebraska, and at this point you choose Nebraska, all I can say is good luck to you, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, obviously there would be some sort of obvious personal connection there, and that's fine. And the way I'm looking at it right now, in terms of those specific flips, I mean, BOL, we do believe there's a lot of fire. That's not just smoke. There's some fire there. Caleb Cunningham to Ole Miss, Dawson Merritt to Nebraska, definitely fire. So those things could happen. But we've also predicted that Ivan Taylor, who's a top 60 player in the country, is going to flip to Alabama. So in my mind, you lose two big ones, but you pick up a big one. You're kind of -1 in the flips there, just -1. That's not bad when you're already the #1 team in recruit. I'm not even sure that with those two flips, as long as you're picking up Ivan Taylor, Alabama might even stay at #1, and maybe. And then there's others. I mean, we're very likely to get one of these two backs, the Jace that's committed to Michigan State, or Harry Dalton, who's committed to USC. I think we're very likely to get one of those guys, which is an ad. That's not a big, super highly ranked guy, but it's a guy the staff really likes both of those kids. So, you got a couple ads, those DBs. How about Donovan Starr, who's committed to Auburn? Who's battling for him? Alabama and Georgia are working to get that kid away from Auburn. And then you got Mason Dunn from Tupelo, who's committed to Ole Miss. He could flip. So Alabama's in a position to land a couple of flips. But I'm not going to sit here, and neither is Luke going to sit here and tell you guys that losing Caleb Cunningham and Dawson Merritt's no big deal. Of course it's a big deal. Alabama staff doesn't want it to happen. But it's just 2024. It's recruiting, and this stuff is going to happen with increasing frequency in this new landscape. And like I said, if you pick up a top 60 player and you're losing Cunningham and Merritt, you're only really -1 when it comes to big headlining flips.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's the whole Turbo Rogers thing in Alabama, looking at one dude who's committed to Michigan State at running back and another committed to USC running back. And, Turbo Rogers, it seems like for all the world he will not be in this class. And, again, fine. I mean, I like him, but I'm not like that. I would – if you ranked the potential flips and where I think it hurts Luke Robinson's personal opinion, I'm going Caleb Cunningham, Dawson Merritt, probably a big gap, and then Turbo.
Yeah, Turbo. I mean, I like Turbo just like I like him. I'd be okay with him as part of this class, but he has not had a senior year that merits headlines. He hasn't even really played a lot of running back. And if you're like, okay, he's a slot receiver, there are better slot receiver prospects out there, than Turbo. He committed to the last staff. People have to understand what that means. He committed to the last staff. He never once publicly committed to the new staff, nor has this new staff pushed for Turbo. He hasn't even taken an official visit to Alabama, and he has officially visited other places. So people just have to understand that it's not like Alabama made this major push. It's not like Turbo ever committed to this staff. He committed to the old staff. No different situation really than Miles Johnson from Bruton, who's in the Florida class, who had, by the way, a really good, nice senior season. It's just that Alabama filled up at inside linebacker with some pretty good dudes. So I'm optimistic about the way it's going to finish. I don't want people out there. There were some questions about how DeBoer would recruit at Alabama. Well, I would say number one's pretty good.
Yeah, number one is very good. And look, I think it's only going to get better as he begins to learn the landscape around here. And
didn't even have a full cycle. This isn't even really a full cycle because he begins in January and not December. It's close to a full cycle, but I think even this next class is an even better look at what his recruiting is really going to look like, to say nothing of the portal.
And, as he begins to dress better, I'm kidding.
I see two Senior Bowl notes that are fun for me. Seth McLaughlin became one of the first Senior Bowl invitees. I'm really happy for Seth. Definitely pull for him. He got rid of the yips at Ohio State and did really well. Jim Nagy with Senior Bowl noted that per one NFL scout, Seth McLaughlin is the most improved player in the country over what he was a year ago. So happy for him. And James Burnham from Alabama, one of the best punters in the world, not in the NFL, will be at the Senior Bowl.
The thing you love about Seth McLaughlin saying, all right, he's one of the most improved players, it also lets you know how ungood he was at Alabama last year.
Per this scout that Jim Nagy didn't identify, but he's an anonymous NFL scout. The way Seth performed last year, had he gone pro, he would have been an undrafted free agent. But his play at Ohio State this year has made him a solid mid-round pick, which to me means, third, fourth, fifth round. Which is great for Seth. I'm really happy for him.
It worked out for everybody then because we got a better center too.
We got a great center in Parker Brailsford. No one at Alabama feels gypped in that deal by any means because Parker Brailsford's been so good. I think, by the way, even though you see Parker in mock drafts, I personally believe Parker will be back at Alabama next fall. I believe so. Again, we don't know right now, but that's what I believe. And boy, what a good deal for Alabama that ended up being. That doesn't mean that we don't get to be happy for Seth, who poured a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into the Alabama program.
Really quickly, before we get out of here, one other note. Apparently, the AD and the president at Oklahoma have issued a statement that they have. I'm going to look for the actual quote. Oklahoma President Joe Haraz and AD Joe Castiglione. Is it Castiglione or Castiglione?
I think it's Castiglione.
Okay. This afternoon expressed unwavering confidence in Brent Venables, despite the Sooners' disappointing first season in the SEC. That is what's known as the calm before the storm. I would not feel good about that if I were Brent Venables at all.
Quickly, yes or no, based on their tremendous success this year, does a big power program from a Power 4 hire Deion Sanders in this offseason?
I wouldn't, because I'm like, is he a product of, number one, not a great schedule, and number two, his own son, and then Travis Hunter,
right?
Two of the best players in the country, and Joe Horn Jr., who's very good. Or is it Jimmy Horn? Is it Jimmy Horn?
That's Joe Horn's son. I don't know.
That's Joe Horn's son. I thought he was Joe Horn Jr., but it's a Horn Jr., whatever it is. So, anyway.
Yeah, my feeling is no, but I'm not going to be surprised. I think he's earned it to an extent, but like Luke said, I'll also buy into what Luke just said. Also could be a product of who they played in the Big 12 and Shedeur Travis, who are as good a two players as play for anybody in college football. And you can ride, and they're going to be gone. So I agree with that. But at the same time, very successful high school coach, then a very successful FCS coach, Now he's a successful FBS coach. I mean, I think you earn your promotions, and I think he's earned it. But I don't think it would happen this year. I think it would have to be one more year of success at Colorado before the quote Oklahomas come calling.
All right, that's going to do it for today's pod. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.